Our presenter today is going to be Jeff Salzman, which most of you know, but I'm going to let Steve introduce him this time. So, Steve, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Rigel. And before I introduce Jeff real quick, I just want to affirm this group's norm, this social norm of respectful political pluralism. There's folks in this group who voted for both candidates. And this is one of those rare spaces where pluralism and respect is highly encouraged in political discussions. Uh, I would say that an integral perspective on pluralism actually goes farther than what people normally understand as pluralism because it recognizes that at the level of bedrock values, the left and the right, in the political spectrum are ultimately interdependent. That is, that their value creating capacity is partially determined by the moderating influence of the other. So this understanding of pluralism as the management of a polarity by establishing a relationship of challenge and support is the sort of the philosophical principle by which we want to really highly encourage this norm of political pluralism, in the discussion that we're going to have after Jeff's done with his presentation. And so challenges are welcome as long as they're done in the context of respect and civility and general support for the container of this group which we're creating. Okay, so just want to say also that next month David Story is going to come back, professor of philosophy David Story. He's going to be talking more about some of the themes that he brought back in July, and his presentation was very popular. So be sure to join us next month for that. But then in February, I'm going to be talking more about pluralism, not so much political pluralism as spiritual pluralism and what that means within an integral cultural frame. So pluralism is certainly something we're going to be exploring, not only tonight, but in the time ahead. Okay, so it is my honor, my deep honor, to introduce my longtime, very close friend and next door neighbor, who is he's been a successful entrepreneur. He's been the one of the original founding members of the Integral Institute. He is a really wise integral pundit and leader. And he's one of the founding members of the Institute for Cultural Evolution, one of the major supporters of our nonprofit organization, one of the original board members, and all around great guy. I give you Jeff Salzman.
Wow. Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And thank you, Rigel. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. It's good to be with you to see if we can sort out this moment in time, culturally and politically, in terms of integral philosophy. And so the basic practice of integral philosophy is to take perspective taking. And as you do this and you realize, so we're talking politics, we're talking the left, we're talking the right, we're talking Kamala, we're talking Trump, and we look at various perspectives, we look from various perspectives, and at some point we realize that our perspectives as we, take on multiple perspectives that are in conflict with each other, that we end up in a space, it's basically a new space of consciousness, an integral space of consciousness, where we see perspectives arising under their own power. And I've seen that. That's one of the sort of, I think, evolutionary achievements that I've had over the last year or so, where I see my opinions and ideas and ideologies more and more as objects rather than part of my subject. I can see them instead of be them. I see things happen and I watch myself react. certain people talk and I'm attracted, I'm repelled. I watch my brain create opinions and access ideologies. And as we can see this instead of be it, then that's sort of intrinsically liberating. And it allows us to be more friendly to reality, to see how rich and unpredictable it all is. And it also allows us to see other people more clearly and to let them in, and makes them more interesting. And there's a new word that I love called sunder, which is the realization that everybody that you meet has the same depth and vivid experience of life and heartache and hopes and dreams and all of that you do. And that's a beautiful thing. Like I said, intrinsically liberating. So in that spirit, I offer my opinions of, sort of at the moment, and they've changed. I was in this political climate, people are always sort of mystified at the undecideds. And I have to say, I was an undecided for basically right up until the last couple days. It's not that I was considering voting for Trump. For me, Trump was disqualified by character. Like I've often said, I'm still stuck at birtherism. The idea that Trump launched his political career by, insinuating and, launching investigations and so forth into Obama's birth and where he was born and was he qualified to be president. And he eventually gave that up, but then he blamed it on Hillary and kind of kept going. So but my quandary was whether or not to vote for Kamala. And I wanted to like Kamala, and I ended up liking Kamala. I ended up voting for Kamala. I read her biography. I think that Kamala is what you would, from an integral perspective, she would be pretty much a plain, vanilla, green thinker. She is, in her bio, she was, in terms of her policy, she was always interested in how policy affected marginalized people. This is the healthy part of green. I think that in the campaign, she moved what you would call it to the center. That's what most people sort of agree. And she never focused on her race or gender. And she did create a certain progressive patriotism, I would say, that I think was very effective. And, it's not like she lost by more than a couple percent. So that's where I was. And now I have to say that, the election happened and we've moved ahead, that I'm kind of okay with Trump winning. Let me just see here. It's funny, I've been trying to put a presentation together, but there's just so much to talk about that I'm just going to sort of look at my notes and see how it goes here. The first thing that helped me to reconcile myself to Trump is I was reading a book called The Education of Henry Adams, which is an autobiography. It's often referred to as one of the greatest autobiographies ever written. And it's written by this historian back in the late 1800s. He wrote the book in 1917, but it's about the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s. And he's the grandson of President John Quincy Adams, and he's a big figure, Henry Adams, in the culture. He's a historian. And I was struck by Adams' description of his frenemy, you'd have to call it, Teddy Roosevelt. He was friends with Teddy Roosevelt, and he also had a lot of criticisms of Teddy Roosevelt. And what he wrote was this. He said, Theodore Roosevelt is a fact, and power when wielded by abnormal energy is the most serious of facts. All Roosevelt's friends knew that his restless and combative energy was more than abnormal. Roosevelt, more than any other man living within the range of notoriety, shows the singular primitive quality that belongs to ultimate matter. He was pure act. And I think, I was stunned by that. It just reminded me so much of Trump. And I've done many podcasts on Donald Trump, all very much pejorative. I mean, when we talk about noticing our opinions and what we respond to and what we're repelled by, I've been consistently repelled by Donald Trump. And part of it is that he's able to access, from an integral perspective, he's able to access what we would call red energy or warrior energy. And so that's somebody who wakes up in the morning fighting. It's not necessarily about winning as much as it is about fighting. And we saw this with him. He lost. He was, as I said in my podcast, finally relegated to the rearview mirror of history. But no, he comes back. And I noticed that, again, the warrior wakes up in the morning ready to fight. He practices fighting. He's thin-skinned. He's always on the make in some way. It's win or lose. It's conspiracies, reactive, in a way, pre-truth. If we look at red, it's actually pre-truth in the sense that rationality hasn't really come online yet. And that's, in a way, the heart of Donald Trump. He's a natural autocrat. He's ruthless in a way that most people aren't. He never lets his guard down. He's interesting and entertaining, a little bit scary. You have to pay attention. You can't ignore him. And I remember I did a podcast a couple of years ago, actually, called Psychopaths Are People Too. And it was a podcast about the recognition of all kinds of people on all kinds of spectrums of empathy and gifts and limitations. And it's one of the things that we've realized as we've evolved into these new structures of consciousness that we're in now, is that, there are people who have empathy disorders, and they have narcissism disorders, and this would be Trump. And I made a note here, actually, of an interview that he did where the interviewer asked him, how do you handle stress? And his response struck me. He said, this is Trump. He said, I try and tell myself it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If you tell yourself it doesn't matter, like you do shows, you do this, you do that, and then you have an earthquake in India where 400,000 people get killed. Honestly, it doesn't matter. That's how I handle stress. And so what has happened for me is I'm seeing that there is room in the world for people who are operating not all the time from red, but they're able to access red. And there's a taboo against red as we develop into, we civilize ourselves in the blue or amber traditional structure. where we learn to sit down and shut up and be obedient and follow the rules. Red doesn't follow the rules. Red fights. Red is on the make. But, Trump understands how to do blue. In fact, he's the standard bearer for traditionalists throughout the country. The God and country people love him because he's their retribution. He's the one who is going up against their enemy, which is the modern and postmodern structures of consciousness. So that's what he's doing. And at some point, I noticed, in fact, Steve came over and we were talking, and I was just observing to Steve that I've stopped hating Trump. And this was, I guess, a little bit before the election. I realized that for me, Trump had moved from just the monster, the cockroach, to a sort of a big daddy, which is, in a way, a more positive version. Again, he can do blue. Of course, he can do modern. He was bestride the New York real estate scene. He knows how to do modernity. He also knows how to do postmodernity in a way, but I think Trump makes the mistake that a lot of conservatives do about postmodernity, where they see woke as a mind virus. Elon Musk talks a lot about this. And I think it's a misunderstanding. I think that every stage comes online on the backs of the fanatics of that stage. So the fanatics of green, of the multicultural, sensitive, rehabilitate the people who have been left behind and marginalized. That could be done in a fanatic way, but there's also something that's coming online that is a permanent acquisition of humanity. And the idea that we would, if you look at history and look at the developmental stages, we talk about, tribal is us and them, okay? Then we have red is predator and prey. People who are on the make and people who are kissing up the big daddy. We have in traditionalism saints and sinners, people who, follow the laws of God and are good citizens, and people who don't. In modernity, we have winners and losers. So when we get to postmodernity and we have an arising consciousness that seeks to rehabilitate the prey, the other, the sinners, the losers. That is an achievement of humanity. And the differentiation between the fanatics, there's fanatic modernists too. I might say that Sam Harris is a fanatic modernist. Sam Harris does not believe in free will. Sam Harris, he sees consciousness as being substrate independent. That is, if you get a complex enough machine, it'll be conscious. And I don't know, maybe that's true, but that's a disenchanting view of humanity that is a fanatic modernist. And, most of us, or some of us, have that in us. So we don't necessarily see just how radical that idea is. So we move from a world where, as Ken Wilber says, where God is everywhere, and that's pre-modern, to a world where God is nowhere and completely banished from the public sphere in about 100 years. So anyway, so we have this Big Daddy Trump who has the worst of this red that he's able to access. Most people in modern culture red is marginalized. It's put in the shadows. We do it surreptitiously. We're not as, somebody once said that Donald Trump is the most authentic con man he's ever met. And I think that's true. And there's something that's charming about that. And, can we believe that this guy has come back at age 78? And that assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he comes up with a bloodied face shouting, "Fight, fight, fight." Not win, win, win. Fight, fight, fight. That's the difference between, winners and losers and just fighting for the sake of fighting. And so that's what we have. And I'm really interested in hearing what you guys think. And so we'll have some Q&A and comments in a few minutes. I also want to talk about Trump's new best friend, and that's Elon Musk. And I'll start by saying that I'm a fanboy of Elon's. And so, take that into consideration. But I have a Tesla. It's my favorite thing. It's a 4-year-old car that is new every month, with new downloads and new capabilities, including that it can fart. And you can choose the fart that it does. And its latest upgrade is called actual self-summons, where you can summons the car to come and get you, which is referred to as ASS, ASS. And I don't like scatological humor, but this is Elon's another example. And I did a podcast on him not long ago, or actually about a year ago, where I talked about him being a spiral wizard. And again, one of the superpowers that Elon Musk has is that he's able to access red. He's able to offend, to create chaos, to destroy as well as create. But he has, more than anybody that I could think of, actually by a factor of 5, cracked the code on visionary creativity at scale. And it's a marvel to see. Now, does he have too much money and power? Maybe. But the system, he has mastered this system. And the question is not necessarily, does he have too much power? Well, that may be a question. But more important is, what's he using his power for? Did he make his money doing hedge funds or arms trading or, finance? No, he did it through creativity. And I would be hard pressed to figure out who has done more actual good for humanity. So the Tesla, the Optima robot, the green energy, battery solar combination, which seems to be where we're going to continue to move. And then, of course, there's SpaceX, the rocket that lands and is caught by chopsticks, Starlink, the satellite system that gets you internet in Antarctica, OpenAI, his artificial intelligence, and OpenAI is part of Grok, which is part of X, which is the old Twitter. And, Grok has become, but Grok and also ChatGPT, I have to say, I probably use them 6, 7, 8 times a day, where I just ask them whatever question. It's so much better than a Google search these days. And so I asked the question to Grok, does Elon Musk lie? And the answer was yes. It was a sophisticated answer, and it talked about how he sometimes, posts outrageous things that sometimes he'll apologize for. He'll talk about what's going to happen and truncate the deadlines, and there's all of that. But I will say that Grok has his number. Then he's also done Neuralink, which is the company that helps the lame to walk and the blind to see. And I see that his latest challenge is to work on the relief of chronic pain. And that's pretty amazing. I don't know how you would rank these achievements, but one of the most significant achievements of Elon Musk, particularly in the last year, is buying Twitter and turning it into X. And as somebody said, Elon bought the Overton window and blew it up. And I think there's truth to that. The Overton window it's a term that I hadn't really heard, but it's a good term for integralists. And the Overton window is the window of things that it's okay to talk about. And that is a moving and evolving thing. But what Elon Musk did was he bought Twitter, which was and is the marketplace for ideas, and has expanded it. And the expansion basically includes the right and the center right, but also to some degree the extreme right. They have their moderation, and you can't do threats or all of it's reasonably well moderated. But for instance, you can now criticize and make fun of gay people. That would be an example. And as a gay man, I have to say that makes me happy, because before Elon, you couldn't. I remember the vice president for safety of Twitter before Elon bought it. I'm forgetting that person's name, but they talked about how the ridiculing gays, trans, marginalized people actually endangers their lives. Well, that is, I think that is a hegemony of the left that was rife and was ripe for being challenged and again exploded. What the left often doesn't realize is to the degree that it has won the culture war. And I'm talking from the 60s on. I remember I did a podcast on this too. The example was Jack Nicholson in Easy Rider, and that scene where he's trying to order toast, but they don't have toast. But they do have toast if you want a tuna fish sandwich. And he's arguing with the waitress in this cafe, and he gets all mad, and he finally gets up and throws everything and pulls the tablecloth off. And I remember that was so cool. And that was in some ways the beginning of this disintegration of, or at least the attack by Green against the man in all of the white, Christian, male, all of those things. Those were available for ridicule. But the left and marginalized people of all kinds still were not. And I think that is that's a healthy change in society. And I think that the mistake that both Elon Musk and Trump and a lot of people on the right make is that they don't respect the emergence of green and differentiate it from the illiberal green. that is, trying to cancel and put forth speech codes and all of the things that were happening. And I think there's been a big change in that. So what is being attacked? And this is evolutionarily potent. So we have online currently three big worldviews: traditionalism, modernism, and postmodernism. They split and they polarize into the left and the right. Modernity splits, sort of the business-like people go to the right, the academics go to the left, and here we have our polarized culture. And I'm sort of pro-polarization in a way. Polarization is the stage on the path. There's a principle in integral that we differentiate before we integrate. So we have to actually take this thing that was this blob and look closely and see that it actually has characteristics, and there's a fighting and friending always going on between the two sides, and that that is from the left and from the right. Those are both attacking modernity in a way that is, I think, fruitful, as long as it stays this side of violent. And it doesn't always. Sometimes we have that January 6th. Sometimes we have this guy who assassinates the healthcare guy. But for the most part, if we stay this side of violent, it's a very fruitful thing that we can engage intentionally. So anyway, I think I'll stop there. I mean, we can talk about all the sort of, gender politics and race and climate, war and peace, abortion, all of it as you wish. But that at least gets us going here. And Rigel, I turn it back over to you. And if people have questions or comments, raise your hand and we'll take it from there.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, like Jeff said, go ahead and raise your hand if you have a comment or question. Remember, keep the spirit of challenge and support. And the best way to raise your hand is click the react button and then the little heart and then the react button. So we've got some folks raising their hands now. I'm going to start with Amiel. Go for it.
Thank you, Rigel. And Jeff, great to see you here and back up speaking. When you said that you're okay with Trump winning, I was immediately curious what you meant by that. And so I want to test out what I was hearing and see what you think. What I was hearing is mostly about your emotional relationship with him in the sense of his impact on triggering, on hating him, I think was the term that you used. And I think that's very hard work to do. Many of us are doing it. What I'm curious about is how, from a spiral perspective, cognitively, you assess the meaning of his victory in terms of what it represents in the populace, looking at the last year or two, and also perhaps what it means looking forward, more from a cognitive perspective than your emotional relationship with him, if that's fair.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I would say that that this election was more about vibes than about policy in a way. I mean, both Harris and Trump, they both have reasonably moderate policies. And this is where I almost didn't think it mattered that much who won. I mean, of course it does. But in terms of the evolution and, where we're going from here, I basically trust the system. And by that, I mean, I trust the system of laws and, advise and consent for Trump's appointees and all of the things that are well established in this country. This is a liberal country with a great liberal tradition that I think can handle Trump. So yeah, maybe I just answer it that way, any thoughts on that? Okay.
Well, for me, I mean, I'm taking the stance of uncertainty in the sense that we don't actually know what's going to happen. So many of us are convinced we know one way or the other. My own assessment, you often say that evolution is neither, it's beautiful, but it's not pretty. Yeah. My take on the election is it's not evolution, it's not beautiful, and it's not pretty. So I have a little different take than you, but I appreciate the sense of basic trust that you have in the systems. And part of me very much hopes that they will endure here, that the liberal democracy, that the system of government, that government ruled by experts and the rule of law rather than mafia-like loyalty sustains. I'm not sure that it's going to fall apart, but I'm definitely not sure it's going to continue. And maybe you and I have a different vibe around that, somewhat different, perhaps, if I'm hearing it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Amiel.
Thanks, Amiel. All right, we're going to go to Ross and then David.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hey, Ross. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Say, just to throw into perspective, I have, of course, been fascinated by Trump like everyone else is, but I am more fascinated by the 72 million people that voted for him. My fellow countrymen, and I will say that when I woke up after the election, I had an epiphany. And it came from thinking back to my old hometown of Freeport, Illinois. And I know, Jeff, you came from Western Pennsylvania, a very similar sort of place. Basically, 100% of my hometown voted for Trump. And
yeah, mine too.
And these were the guys that I used to go fishing with, play baseball with, play touch football with, and stuff like that. And my epiphany was that it was a cry from them to be seen. And they were saying, can you see me now? How about now? Can you see me now? And I realized that in my progression and in consciousness and all that sort of stuff through law school, getting kind of the elite credentials and succeeding in the educational system and then in the modernist system and all of that sort of stuff, that I completely left them behind. Okay. And they were kind of forgotten in my psyche. So I guess my question is, how does Integral embrace them? Not as its, but as part of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, even theoretically, all of those stages are alive within us. So every stage, as it arises, wants to marginalize and repress the stage that it's coming out of. And I did. I grew up like you in a very conservative, redneck. We had the rednecks and the hillbillies. The rednecks were blue and the hillbillies were red. The hillbillies didn't go to work, but the rednecks did, that kind of thing. And all of these people are Trumpers. And what their resistance, there's a couple big areas of resistance that they have to the dominant culture. One is that the dominant culture is disenchanted. It has, science has, turned us into blobs of protoplasm who are on a rock hurtling through space for no apparent reason. And that is deadening to people who are alive to, whether it's God or some spiritual dimension of reality. Now that comes back after modernity, but modernity wrings it out. So that's a biggie. The other is, if we think of green postmodern consciousness, it's world-centric. Pre-modern consciousness is not world-centric. It's particular to my culture, to my country. And so I think the integral view, the coming integral age, which we're hurtling towards, in my opinion, will have room for the sensitive, multicultural, climate, the whole sort of insight that green has. It'll have rationality and expertise and merit and all of the things that modernity brings. And then it'll have a sense of who am I and what am I faithful to and what's my identity and who am I obedient to? And these are, traditional vibes. And I think all of those will be included, including red. I think actually our grandchildren will be as different from us as we are from our grandparents. And I think one of the things that we'll see as culture evolves is people will be more rude. People will be more honest, more vivid, less easily offended. And I look forward to that. I think there was something of a suffocating wet blanket that was descending upon the culture, and that's not going to, that's sort of this media vetted. If you watch like the mainstream media now, it's sort of sad. In a way, I mean, they're still just sort of flogging these same, I don't know, this worldview of, I don't know, Rachel Maddow or it's just, to me, I was way tired of it. And I think in the integral world, we'll have to integrate more of these earlier stages. And we do it in a way that where we leave we integrate the best and leave the worst. So I don't know. I'm just rambling, but that's my take on it.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Great, Jeff. All right, we're gonna go to David RL and then David Story.
Jeff, thank you very much. I just want to first commend you for your courage and candor in sharing not only your journey, but kind of where you currently are floating on top of your perspectives here tonight. Definitely appreciate the vulnerability and the earnestness with which you're communicating your message. I think a question that comes to mind for me is, given the turmoil that so many people that are very much caught in the political maelstrom, regardless of which side or which button they want to push or where they are in the aisles. As you mentioned with the news media, there's a lot of, frankly, a lot of suffering for people kind of wound up in their various narratives. And what I really appreciate in seeing you here is a certain warmth and joy and sort of freedom from that Gordian knot. And so I wonder if you might be able to share some of your tips or learnings or secrets for those that are caught in that Gordian knot and wish to be less wound up in it. Because I think that the journey you're making here is really inspiring, especially for a lot of people that are really caught in any number of narratives around the horrors that may be happening or already happened or could be happening.
Yeah. Well, I've sort of switched from being critical to curious in general, or at least that's my goal. And so when I talk to people, I'm less interested in influencing them as I am by being influenced by them. And that's a practice. That doesn't come easy. But then it becomes very interesting because I know people who, the aliens are here. I know people, the assassination was staged. These are people in the integral world who, so they're left, they're right. But how interesting it is that everybody connects dots in a way that makes the world make sense to them. And so does a Trump. So did Kamala. So does everybody. I used to listen to, I still do listen to Trump and roll my eyes and, have to fight nausea half of the time. Matt Gaetz, and it's like John Fetterman said, that was a God-level troll of the U.S. Senate. By the way, trolling is a red activity. It's just the idea is let's just blow things up, make people mad, create chaos. And, it's like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones said, chaos is a ladder. There's something that is fruitful about that. And, if I think of Trump and Elon Musk as just two perfect examples, they know how to do that. And so anyway, at this point, I talk to people with an ear to really believing what they have to say. I don't know whether it's integral multi-perspectivalism or just weak-mindedness, but I tend to believe the last person I talk to. How's that?
All right. Great, Jeff. Okay, David's story and then Dennis.
Hey, Jeff. Great to hear your reactions, how you're processing all this. I was interested to hear that you had similar reaction to me. I hadn't formulated in terms of I stopped hating Trump, but I definitely, right at the election, I just had this acceptance and deep curiosity and almost awe washed over me and made me kind of relax my priors. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking about something I saw Rob Smith post on Twitter. He said, red fixes green. Red fixes green. And I haven't quite figured out how to articulate it yet, but I'm wondering if there's some release of all this red energy that is necessary and is going to be productive in ways we can't fully understand yet. I've been teaching the Bible in my classes, and the scene where the Jews interpret their conquest by the Babylonians, they see God as having used Nebuchadnezzar as a tool to teach the Israelites a lesson for their idolatry. So you can interpret Trump in sort of that similar symbolic manner. But I'm curious what you think about that. What's the productive consequences that might come from what on the surface is a very turbulent, red explosion in the culture, and especially with young men? I'm curious how you interpret that shift in the culture in terms of the electorate, turning toward Trump strongly.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that red does for us is it blows our minds. And I mean that in a good sense. So, we get everything is subject to ridicule. Everything is subject to, argument. And I think that we're moving. I think our grandchildren will look back on this age and say, "Wow, that was the age of ideology." And I think that we're actually growing out of this age of ideologies to a world where we just do what works. And it's not that hard to know what works at some point. And because we have so much information, now we have artificial intelligence processing that information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that, you know, I'm looking to become post-ideological myself. And I think Trump in many ways is. You know, he just wants, I do think that he just wants to do what works. I think that, you know, Trump's red streak will come in very handy with the autocrats around the world. I think he probably will have a better way of dealing with Putin and, you know, Zelensky and all of it than, you know, what we have is under Biden, you know, we have what, 40,000 Ukrainians killed, several 100,000 people have died in wars in the last few years. I'm not sure that when I think of war and peace, I think that the hot zones of the world, for the most part, let's just freeze them as best we can, make some kind of a deal where people stop killing each other, and then let the world turn. You know, because everybody's grandchildren are on the internet, no matter what their ideology is in their country or, you know, their party. And it's going to be a new world of, I think it'll be a more pragmatic world than the world we live in now. And, you know, more fruitful. Make sense?
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, and you were talking about young men. Boy. You know, every stage of development is seen by the stage that it's coming out of, you know. So if you think of the warrior looking at the farmer, or the farmer looking at the modernist, every stage sees it as a degradation of the values of that society. And often they see it as a feminization of the society. So that's one of the critiques that modernity has to postmodernity. That was one of the critiques that traditionalism had to modernity and warriors have to traditionalism, is that the society is becoming more feminine. And that is, you know, welcome to evolution, where humanity wants to expand to include both the masculine and feminine. Everybody does. That's one of the reasons that you have, you know, 30 or 40% of the girls in high school claiming to be bisexual or, you know, transgender or whatever. Young people particularly are not willing to put on the straitjackets of the sex roles. Now, so that's the progress part. The reaction to that progress is, you know, a reaffirmation of traditional masculinity. This is good. We want it all. I mean, we don't realize how complex we can think. And all of the dimensions of humanity that we can hold. And when our grandchildren look back on us, they'll think, oh, those poor people. Just like we look back, you know, at the Victorians, you know, sipping their tea with their pinky out. You know, humanity is, we're headed to a riot. You know, we're going to be riding each other like ponies. And that's a good thing. So, you know, yeah. We'll see how it turns out, but and lots of consternation to come. But I think that's the direction we're heading.
Cool. Before we go to Dennis, I just want to jump in for a second. It makes me think of, like, a 3 or 4 year old that's having a temper tantrum as a new-ish parent, it's actually a good sign that they feel safe enough to be able to have that tantrum and know that like the world's not going to collapse around them. And I mean, if we survive this, I wonder if this is just a, cultural tantrum that we're having. We'll build trust in the end.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, we created a world that was so predictable and safe and prosperous and peaceful that it made room for Trump. That's actually a sign of, it's like you said, a 2-year-old tantrum. We're essentially having that, some version of that culturally. And it's okay. It will bust things up in a way, we tend to focus on the ways that society is disintegrating. And it always is. That's part of evolution. Welcome to, emergence. But what's also happening that is often beneath the surface is what's being built and what's being added. And, I think we friend about 7 times as often as we fight. And that's the story of humanity, but we don't notice that part as much.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Dennis and then Safrir.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for the great takes tonight. Since we're talking politics, I have to ask for a prediction or two. But first, can you explain RFK to me from the level of his worldview and spiral dynamics? And the prediction is, how long do you think these relationships between Trump and RFK and Trump and Elon Musk will last?
Those are good questions. Yeah, they're all characters for sure. I don't know that much about RFK, except, there was the famous Atlantic article from David Brooks that really, turned, and there's the sort of media cartoon version of him that I used to buy. I don't know that I don't know anymore. I think there's a progress around, I'm not sure anymore. And let's just see what actually happens. I don't think anybody, or there's many people who disagree with the idea of make America healthy, and I was having fun with a friend of mine, and he had a birthday, and I bought him a box of Fruit Loops because we were talking about this and the difference between Fruit Loops in America and the Fruit Loops in Canada. And in Canada, they're very drab and ugly, and here they're very vivid and green and blue and orange and yellow. And it's because of all these additives and dyes and so forth. And obesity, diabetes. I don't know about autism. I mean, I don't know. That's the, there's, and this is, part of the evolution of the, what we would say the second person, the evolution of how we relate to each other and the media and so forth, is that we now know that we don't know what's going on. We used to think that we knew what was going on because we had the sort of center-left Waterkronkite view, very, very fruitful. What a great time in history. Look what it did for us. It will continue to. We want it to continue to function, this sort of, modern left kind of thing. But, it's not the only thing. And we can handle more, is what I would say. We can handle more. There's more craziness, and we can handle it.
Thanks. That's reassuring.
Great. All right, let's go to Safrir and then Mary.
Okay. First, Jeff, thank you very much. You got to be crazy or brave to do this, but definitely it shows some flexibility, which is a characteristic I love. I don't know if I can, but I will try to represent non-local perspective, because I'm not voting, not living in the US. And Trump is not local phenomena. This is happening in many countries in the past, let's say, 15 years. And everything that was predicted is starting to become a mystery, and the emotions are taking a bigger place all around the world. And for me, trying to make my mind from any first tier perspective, always I get to a dead end. I wonder, is it possible that what we are seeing now is actually the collapse of first tier, which we see that no first tier will work, not the most progressive and smart orange combined with green will not be able to create a healthy society. And of course, the other way. So is it possible for you also to look at it as maybe as hopeful way of the end of first year, or what does it mean about the giant leaps that we all waiting for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the, I think the characteristics of second tier or integral consciousness is that we allow first tier to be who they are. So we don't go invade them and try to make them modern anymore. It's like Trump's speech. I remember his speech to the United Nations, if I could spit that out, back in his first term, where he talked about America first. And he said, you know, I'm America first. Everybody should be your country first. And then, you know, we'll take it from there. And I see the integral world as, you know, recognizing that there are countries where the center of gravity is traditional. They're going to have laws and culture that is offensive to us. We need to let them grow. It's like, you know, is it progress for a child, for a fresh-faced 10-year-old to turn into a surly 13-year-old? No, it doesn't. That doesn't seem like progress, but it actually is. And so I think in the integral world, we just accept, you know, let everybody be as healthy as possible at the stage that they're at. And again, try to keep it as peaceful as possible, use our influence to do that, and let the grandchildren, you know, be on the internet. And a world consciousness is coming on so fast, it's hard to even imagine, really. I mean, it's hard to overestimate what the internet has done for, you know, human consciousness, and I think the fruits that we'll see in the next couple generations. I don't know if that responds to your question, but that's.
Yeah, I thank you for this. I hope that, you know, we learn something from it, and it's without, you know, we don't need to fight first year, but
right.
Looking at the process that's happening, it seems logical that people will stop adapting opinions like today, because it's not relevant anymore. And that might lead to some kind of new.
Yeah.
My hope.
Well said.
All right. Let's go on to Mary and then Barbara.
Thank you, Rigel. I I want to just add two things. One, it's overwhelming, or I am overwhelmed at the appreciation for this dialogue being in stark contrast to what is available kind of broadly, and references to current state of media and the patterns they've defaulted to and are stuck in and so forth. So I for the people that I speak with the most, we crave a much deeper, more discerning dialogue about all of these layers. So deep, mad appreciation for this platform and for all of the comments. I've been following all of the chats as well. More of this we need, even though it triggers everyone in a different way, a stronger or not so strong way. So please, more of this. And thank you all for being here for this. The second thing I want to hear, Jeff, you might opine a little bit about. I am a bit obsessed myself as a former local elected at the state of governance in our country, given all of its history and evolution to some degree, and the state of the corruption and everything, the reasons people get into governance. I think there's at least two camps there. People are there to be a dignitary, and it's about ego and power and influence, and others are there to really be a public servant. So what I was voted for Kamala. I love the genius of Elon Musk. I drive a Tesla. I love that car so much it's not even funny. And mine's as old as yours, Jeff. I'm amazed by this. And so it's also so I love the chaos is a ladder to me, kind of captures the nature of this conversation and where we're at. The part about the state of our governance structures, processes, and to me, the deep need for that to evolve in a really profound way to meet the moment that we are in on the planet, because I don't think we've had a transformational leader with true vision to meet the moment emerge in these national elections, and probably at every level. And I think we desperately need a highly discerning transformational leader or 10 to emerge. Mm-hmm. And I think that, so I have trouble defaulting to try and say, are we going to live through Trump? Is he just a chaos ladder, and that's the role he's playing? And so let's just go with it and try not to lose our head and take the chaos and turn it into something productive, positive for all, my opinion. Mm-hmm. What have you to say about the state of politics and governance in our country?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that Trump is bringing on a new integration of the right. So the world going forward will include the sensibilities of the right, traditional, early modern, in ways that it didn't before, and we needed to. That we need to have that in order to move into an integral world. One of the things that is, in terms of the actual governance of the country, that I think is alarming and needs to be dealt with, is the growth of government, the administrative state, the spending, if you will. And this is where, I don't know, but I'm really kind of interested to see what Elon Musk does and Ramaswamy with this DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Again, I trust Elon Musk to have he may understand it differently than I do, and he may be deluded. And I like I said, I think he's misunderstood woke. But I think that somebody with his understanding of systems at scale, it's going to be very, very interesting. And then to have Trump as the battering ram, I don't know. I think that we're going to see a challenge to the administrative state that is probably right on schedule, evolutionarily.
All right. Thanks, Mary. Let's go to Barbara, and then if we have time, Bert.
You know, interesting your mention of Doge, because it had popped into my head too that we needed a resurrection of more healthy orange, and I do think that you know, God, we could balance a checkbook. You know, Musk in his own businesses is rather frugal, as I understand it. But I also, you know, I heard you say, and several other people, and in saying that, well, we trust in our existing system, and you know, the world is prosperous. And I will tell you that my neighbors that voted for Trump would tell you, "Are you nuts? I'm not prosperous. The world is not a good place for me, and I want change." So when poor Kamala comes out and says, "I wouldn't do anything differently," my neighbors go, "That's it." And even we have a lot of independents around here, and that statement of hers lost them. Even the independents, you know, they don't think that we can trust. And I think your comments just recently about all the dysfunctions that we see in government. You know, a lot of the Trump votes that aren't among the hillbilly red group are, you know, things have to change. Kamala says she won't do it. You know, I guess we literally toss the dice and see what happens in chaos. And then I think there's also just a tremendous amount of resentment of folks who think that they're experts, so you can't ask them questions. I mean, you know, and I find my not too well-educated red and blue neighbors ask much better questions than my college friends in Madison. So I think maybe we need to give ourselves a look about our own biases sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we need to challenge our own worldview all the time, and as a practice, let in the, you know, very smart people have come to very different conclusions about the world and where we ought to be and where we're going, and you know, an integral perspective sort of asks us to, as best we can, let that in and, you know, see where they're coming from. And like I said, that is intrinsically liberating to do that, and exciting and fun.
And, you know, I think some of those diametrically opposed conclusions are from people at the same stage. You know, just because I'm green or just because I'm orange doesn't mean that my life path and my life conditions have been anything like yours. And so I just may have a lot of difficulty seeing how you in your nice ivory tower college classroom came to that conclusion when it doesn't make sense to me, even though we actually process at a spiral dynamic level in a similar way. There's still our life conditions.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And, you know, the challenge is to be friendlier to everybody. And that's a pretty simple kind of a principle. So.
Oh, come on. I want my mean green, Jeff.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Be friendlier to everybody. Final words to end on. Just a reminder that David Story will be our presenter next month on January 8th. Really looking forward to that. Jeff, thank you so much. Let's all give him a round of applause. Appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
That was a really great conversation. Thanks for leading the charge.
All right. Thank you, Rigel. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, we'll keep it going.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Rigel. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Look forward
Happy
to seeing you next month.
holidays.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Bravo. Bravo.
Good night, all.